This is the part 2 of improving wellness and longevity with Olympic weightlifting, which Olympic weightlifting, as we talked about in part 1, if you haven't seen that, go back and do that. Some of the vast importance of what Olympic weightlifting can do besides just competing or having a sport. The actual lifts themselves are fantastic for the body. So again, we're going to be talking about the snatch and the clean. And sorry, I'll back up real quick. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. It's just me. So I'm going to try to look back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, but I don't want to waste a bunch of time. I want to try to get through the information. So I'll look there when I need to. Okay. All right. So let's go. Snatch and the clean is basically what we're looking for. We're not talking about the jerk specifically, but if you have mobility to do the snatch and the clean, you're going to have mobility to do the jerk. So first off, I want to go through some of the positions and the mobility required, just so we can break that down very simplistically. This is very simplistically relative to the actual mobility concerns and needs. But when we start from in the snatch, we obviously need ankle, hip, and knee flexion. That is something that is so overlooked when I talk about flexion, because people are always focused on triple extension, posterior chaining, yada, yada, yada. But we forget that we have to have the ability to flex. And as we get into understanding, I'm going to get a little bit geeky and sciencey in this one. So I need you guys to buckle up a little bit, because as we go through some science, I'm going to talk you through very simplistically how mobility works, how the body produces movement, which most people do not understand very well. And because we just have a certain train of thought in education that's incomplete, so I'm going to pull some information out, and then we're going to give some actual practical applications at the end, and then you have those programs that you can download. And then I would strongly suggest, 1, getting the online free course, since it's free for you, and 2, if you can show up in Sweden, do that, because you'll experience something and be able to see stuff from the whole mobility standpoint that you won't be able to see. You've never seen it anywhere before. I can guarantee that, because we've done so much work in the last 12 months, specifically here at Eleiko, to find out some things that just haven't been talked about before. Okay, so ankle, knee, hip flexion, shoulder internal rotation, spinal extension as you start off from the ground. Then you have to have shoulder internal rotation and spinal extension as you continue to move up. You need shoulder internal rotation and spinal extension as you continue. So all of this internal rotation, this is where the shoulders have to have internal and external rotation and the ability to transfer between the two at the drop of a dime. That's not as easy. And you have to go in that spinal extended position and be able to maintain that. That is still considered mobility, just because you're getting there. And people always use stability and mobility. They're one and the same. You can't separate the two. You have to have mobility to have stability. You have to have stability to have mobility. So it's like throwing a Frisbee. If the Frisbee doesn't spin, if it's not mobile, it's not going to be stable. All right, so then we get into ankle, knee, and hip extensions, shoulder internal rotation, spinal extension as we start to come up higher into the second pull or the third pull, depending on what philosophy you're looking at. And then we have to go back into flexion, hip, knee, ankle flexion with shoulder external rotation as we turn the bar over, as we get under the bar, better said, and then spinal extension. So we need to have the consistency to be able to maintain spinal extension, because that changes the thoracic spine, that changes pelvic position, that changes the shoulder girdle. So without the ability to maintain that, we're lost. And just working tons of spinal extension won't necessarily guarantee that you have good spinal extension. So I want to touch on that very quickly. And then as we go through, again, we have to have the continued shoulder external rotation all the way up. Same thing happens with the clean. We go from flexion, internal rotation, maintaining that all the way up until we get under the bar, and then we have to have the external rotation in the shoulders as we get under the bar. And that's how we have to go transition. So we have to have flexion, from hip flexion to hip extension. And if you don't have good hip flexion, you oftentimes won't have great hip extension, because that means the hip's not working real well. Gaining hip flexion isn't just about flexing the hip. It's about making sure that the hip has the ability to rotate internally in the ball and socket joint. And that means that there's multiple things that have to be going on in order to have good hip flexion. So if you're one of those people that can't actually get into a deep squat without load, that means you don't have good mobility. Doesn't matter what it looks like when you have load on you, it's what it looks like when you don't have load on you. That determines your mobility. All right, so let's now look at some geeky information about understanding human movement and mobility. This is how the body produces motion. Most people don't understand this and don't talk about this. So if you pay attention to this, and if I can do a good enough job explaining it to you, you will know more than about 98% of the people in the world on this topic, unfortunately. And I don't say that with any disrespect to anybody or anything. It just, that's the truth based upon everything that I've seen over the last 30 years of my education career. So human movement is produced both voluntarily and reflexively through a process called sensory motor integration. That's just a really fancy word to say that the body, the central nervous system, is basically an antenna. It receives information from all types of receptors in the body, and that's the sensory input. So that's the sensory component of the sensory motor integration. The brain receives information. The brain does not dictate what we do. It receives information and creates an output. So it reacts to the information and responds based upon what we give it. Poor information comes in, you're going to get poor movement out. Then it takes that information and it processes it. That's the integrated. So it starts to process it with everything that it has, all the information that it has in there from all your past experiences, all the capabilities, what's working, what's not working in the body, and then it produces a motor response. If you understand that, you're way ahead of the game, because we think that the body automatically works the way it's supposed to. We think muscles turn on the way they're supposed to. We think that things turn and do stuff and we have the right strength and the motor units are being turned on. That does not happen. The body does not work just because it's supposed to work. Does not mean it's going to work. There are many things that switch things off in the body. There are many sources, and that we'll talk about it: fatigue, inflammation, all of these things make a dramatic impact on how the body will work. So don't assume that just because you're strong, your body's working great. If you have aches and pains, your body's not working great. The body does not work the way we think it does just because we're told it does. So there are various types of receptors that the information comes from to the central nervous system. We have vision, we have the vestibular, we have all these different sensations, but one of the most important receptors, or one of the most important sensory inputs that we have, is proprioception. And that's vital for understanding movement. So the proprioceptors, and the most important proprioceptor that we have is muscle spindles. Muscle spindles over the last few years have gotten a ton of information about them. They are almost like a little brain inside of our muscular tissue, muscle tendon unit. You're going to hear me say muscle tendon unit a lot because that's going to be very important, and I'll talk about that later. So the muscle spindles, by research, have been deemed as the most important proprioceptors. Not that the other ones aren't important, but the muscle spindle is actually like a mini brain that actually receives information from other receptors as well. And it's vital because it tells the central nervous system whether or not the muscle fibers and motor units are able to activate, means turn on, or respond with precise timing. Huge concept. Your muscle spindles, and I'll repeat it multiple times, dictate your muscle function, not the other way around. An important note: muscle spindles are sensitive to both lengthening and shortening. Most of you were probably taught that they respond to a stretch. That's true, they can, but that's a protective mechanism that we can use to maximize performance. However, they have to respond to shortening of the muscle tendon unit. And that's where they should be called a length regulator, not a stretch receptor. So if you've been taught that they only respond to stretch and then voila, that's incomplete. They respond to shortening. In fact, shortening is actually probably more important than just the lengthening. And we'll talk about why here in a second. So muscle spindles, interestingly enough, are not actually located within the muscle. They're in the paramecium of the muscle, which is still inside the muscle bellies, but it's actually in the fascial component of that, which is why the muscle tendon unit is so vitally important, because all muscles have tendons and they work together. They're not two separate tissues. They're one connective tissue. They're one tissue with different properties and functions. Muscle fibers generate force. Muscle tendons, the connective tissue, distributes that force or transfers that force. They have to work together. They can't work without each other. If they do, which is the case that usually happens, we end up with some type of musculoskeletal injury or some type of soft tissue injury, which is usually to the connective tissue. They respond to change in length, like we talked about, short and long, and the rate of change, how fast that occurs in the muscle tendon unit. The purpose is to communicate. Now, their purpose is vital. It communicates with the central nervous system constantly about the state of readiness of muscle fibers and motor units. It tells the central nervous system whether they should be contracting the muscle tendon unit or whether the muscle tendon unit is contracting. And that'll be important as we go through that. Hopefully to this point, everyone's okay. So muscle spindles must be able to shorten and lengthen simultaneously with the muscle tendon unit to provide accurate information to the central nervous system in order for the muscle tendon unit to contract with precise timing. Precise timing is the actual key, because if they don't turn on exactly when they're supposed to, the joint isn't stable. If the joint isn't stable, the body senses instability and it will tighten up. That's, by the way, where we get tight muscles. Just kind of foreshadowing what's coming. So how does the muscle spindle know how to, and is it able to actually simultaneously move with muscle fibers or the muscle tendon unit, I should say? So number one, when the muscle tendon unit changes its length, spindles send sensory input to the nervous system. That's the green line to the yellow circle there. This input back to the muscle tells the central nervous system what to do with the muscle. The spindle information to the central nervous system is actually what tells the muscle what to do. It tells the brain how the brain should be controlling the muscle. So without the spindle, the muscle won't do anything. I'm going to say that again. Without the spindle functioning properly, the musculature, the muscle fibers associated with that spindle won't do anything, because the brain has no sensory input, doesn't know what to do. When muscle tendon units are shortening or told to contract, the muscle spindle will simultaneously activate coactivation, making it shorten to maintain sensitivity to ensure it provides accurate information. So that muscle spindle has to always maintain a proper tension within itself, whether it's short or long, so that it can be sensitive to what's happening in its environment. So if you've ever gone fishing, those of you that have ever gone fishing, and if you haven't, you've probably seen fishing in a movie somewhere or on video. When you throw or cast your line into the water, what's the first thing you do with that line once you throw it into the water? You start reeling in the slack. Why do you reel in the slack? You reel in the slack so there's tension in the line, so it's sensitive to feeling the fish when it bites the hook. That's what the spindle does in super simplicity. So in a summary, the alpha gamma coactivation prevents the muscle spindles from becoming slack to allow the muscle tendon unit to shorten properly. So see the yellow circle. If the muscle has to shorten, or as the muscle's being shortened, whether it's passively or actively, it doesn't matter if we're actively contracting it or if it's being passively contracted, that muscle belly or the muscle spindle still has to shorten to maintain its sensitivity for when it's then lengthened again. And when it's lengthened, as it starts to shorten, it has to maintain sensitivity, so it has to continually shorten. So it's feeding information to the central nervous system to let it know that it is shortening. And we're going to talk about why that's so important in just a second. So maintaining the spindle sensitivity allows for accurate feedback to the central nervous system. Remember, the central nervous system only operates based on the feedback that it gets. And this allows for proper sensory motor integration. It means I have proper input, I'm going to get proper output. And for something called reciprocal inhibition. This is extremely important when we start talking about mobility and range of motion. Without the alpha gamma coactivation, without that sensitivity regulator, muscles wouldn't be able to contract properly and joint motion is going to be limited, period. Key point, muscle spindles must shorten for their muscle fibers to shorten and the opposing muscle tendon units to lengthen. So if my muscle can't shorten, then the opposing muscle tendon units won't be able to lengthen. This is reciprocal inhibition. So reciprocal inhibition is when a muscle tendon unit shortens, whether passively or actively, the muscle spindles send information to the spinal cord that this muscle is shortening. So in this picture, if that knee joint goes, if you start going into extension of the knee, like you do in a leg extension exercise, as long as that spindle, or as long as that muscle is shortening, that spindle has to shorten. If that spindle gets to a point where it can't shorten, there's no more information going to be going to the central nervous system. So the input from the central nervous system, when the muscle spindle is sending information to the spinal cord, the spindle saying, hey, we're shortening, we're shortening, we're shortening. As long as it's telling the central nervous system that we're shortening, then that input is going to send an input to the opposing musculature, in this case the hamstring, to decrease its activation. That's reciprocal inhibition. We're going to inhibit the activation of the opposing muscles so we can continue to shorten that knee joint, or increase the range of motion in that knee joint if I'm going into extension. I can get maximal extension as long as the muscles that are extending, the spindles, are able to communicate that we're able to shorten, we're able to shorten, we're able to shorten. That's where the hamstring is being told to just lay low, let it go. We're all good. So as long as the central nervous system is receiving input from the muscle spindles that the muscle tendon unit is shortening, opposing muscle tendon units will be allowed to lengthen and joint motion will occur with proper control and full range of motion. So here's why we get tight and lose mobility. This is essential. Muscle spindles become dysfunctional as a result of overuse, fatigue, and prolonged inflammation, and or when the muscle has been exceeded its tolerance level. And I'll talk about this as we get into some practical applications. So remember, muscle spindles will become dysfunctional, and they are very dysfunctional in most everybody, and you don't even know it. And I'm saying that based on proof, because I deal with people all the time and work with them all the time, and it's very simple to find out. You just muscle test them. So when this happens, muscle spindles are no longer able to send information to the central nervous system about the muscle tendon unit shortening. So when they get knocked offline, when they become dysfunctional, basically they're knocked offline and they can't send information to the central nervous system about the state of readiness of that muscle. They can't tell the central nervous system that this muscle, I don't know if it's shortening or not, I'm offline. In this case, reciprocal inhibition is no longer in effect. When the messages stop going to the central nervous system, we no longer have reciprocal inhibition, and that means the opposing muscle fibers will no longer be inhibited, and then they activate. They actually turn on, which is what we call tightness. So we feel tightness in area, soreness in what, because the spindles somewhere aren't working properly and the body's responding in a protective mechanism. Tightness is a protective mechanism. Think of yourself, and some of you know this better than others. So I live in Northern California. It's about, I don't know, about what is it, 25 degrees here today, Celsius. Some of you live in places where you have ice. So if you're walking along a sidewalk or you're walking along the field and you hit ice, what do you immediately do? Do you just start, woo, or do you tighten up? When you hit ice, your body tightens up. That's a natural response to instability. That's why muscles tighten. So when opposing muscle fibers activate when they shouldn't be and tighten up, it hinders or prevents further joint motion. And this is the reason why we feel tight and lack range of motion. So in summary, contrary to popular belief, tightness has basically nothing to do with that particular muscle tendon unit itself. So we look at hamstrings. I'll look at hamstrings because they're just brutally abused. They're always being stretched, but the hamstring isn't tight because it's short and it can't do anything. It's tight because it lacks the spindle input to reciprocally inhibit it. So the lack of range of motion isn't caused by the tight muscles. The tight muscles are a symptom that there is something dysfunctional. It's based on the principle of reciprocal inhibition that we just talked about. The primary cause of tightness and lack of joint range of motion is dysfunction in muscle spindles, not in the tissue that's tight. That's just a protective mechanism. That's a symptom. So specifically, the opposing and or synergistic muscle fibers and motor units of the ones that feel tight. So it could be a hip flexor situation. It could be an abdominal situation. It could be a glute. It could be a quad. It could be, there's a myriad of different things that could be dysfunctional when we're talking about the muscle spindle. Muscle spindles could be dysfunctional in other muscles, not the hamstring. But the hamstring is going to feel tight because it's the one that's being protective. It's being a protective mechanism. So key point, muscle spindle function dictates what muscles do, whether they contract or relax, which ultimately affects joint range of motion. That's huge for us to understand. I hope that makes sense to you. I'll pause for a second. I just want to look through to see if anyone, so you don't see the links or codes in the chat. Is that correct? You guys, did you guys find the chat area? So I see some thumbs up and some thumbs down. So where can I find the link to the free? Okay. So let me do this. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second here and let me try to get something for you guys since you can't find that. Let me see if I can put him in here. That is so bizarre. So you guys aren't seeing the chat. Very interesting. Because I don't know if I can put it in this thing. So what I will do is nobody can see the chat, so you can't get that free online course. Here's what I'll do. I will send you guys, so everyone that's on this call, on this webinar, I will send you the links You will get all these links except for the free online course. You will get all these links in a follow-up email, but I will specifically send you the links to the free online course after this call. I'll send you an email because I'll have all your specific emails of the ones that were on the course, and I'll send that to you so you guys have that. Is that a deal? And that way we won't waste too much time. So thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry, I don't know what the chat function is doing because it's in my chat and I can see it. So let me see. Let me try one thing. Let's try one thing real quick. Let me know if it works. If it doesn't, great. If it does, great. All right, I'm gonna send this to everyone. Let's do this right here. It says going to everyone, so I'm going to send this to everyone. If it doesn't show through, then let me know. That's not it. So let me just send. There's programs. Did that show up to you guys? Did you see that come through? Got that one? Okay, let's try this one. Sorry about that, guys. For those of you that have ever worked things by yourself, you know it's kind of awkward when you got all these presentations open. So I just sent the free online course. Did the free online course show up to you guys? Sweet. Yeah, sorry that it didn't come through. So let's go back and do this. The first one was the mobility programs. That's the free online course. I'll do one more, but you will also get these, like I said, in a follow-up email that will have the recording. So this is recorded, obviously. And you'll get the other links in the follow-up email as well. So here's the live course in Sweden. That just came through. So if you want to register for that, let me know if that one came through. Sweet. All right, so you got the programs that you can go check out. You got the free online course, definitely get that. And if you want to come to the live course in Sweden, we'd love to see you there. We'd love to go through it, and it's a blast because you're going to see and feel and learn stuff that's like, what? I had no idea. All right, so let's get back to reality. Appreciate your guys' patience. Thank you so much. So let's look at some best practices. Again, I'm going to go through just stuff, but if you get the online course at minimum, and if you can come to Sweden and see the live course, you will experience this and it will change your life. I guarantee it. We've had people who could hardly even do an overhead squat go into a full squat at the end of literally an hour just by going through and doing the things that are the right things to do. So let's talk about some of the best practices. I have so many stories of people that I've worked with, especially over the last 12 to 18 months, that will just blow your mind about how much they're better able to move. And I just want to reassure you that the programs that we've given you, if you use them right, they will make a difference. There are obviously snapshots, and there are only minimal things that they only take about 10 minutes to do, but it can definitely change how you move and feel. Okay, so let's get into best practice number one. There's only two of them. You got to know how the body works. We have so many mobility strategies and so many things that we do that force the body to do something, not ask it to do what it wants to do or turn on the switches of how it actually works. We're trying to override the system versus getting the system to work. So all we're doing is putting Band-Aids on something that we think we're getting better motion and we're not. And I can prove that. And if you come to the live course, we'll show you. I will prove it to you how these things work because I've seen it in hundreds of people now over the last 18 months. So what that means is, number one, the muscle spindle function dictates muscle action and joint range of motion. Muscles aren't tight and we don't have a lack of motion because we need to force them to go into things. So pushing things, pulling things, twisting things that can't go there, that won't turn things on, that actually turns things off. So we have to understand that we've got to be able to find how does the muscle spindle function, and can we turn that muscle spindle on? And the answer is yes. And in the online course and the live course, we will show you how to reactivate muscles instantly. It doesn't take much. I have an 82-year-old client. She's an 82-year-old client who could hardly walk 3 months ago. Saw her 7 times and walked through her things for her, and I gave her stuff. And now when I muscle test her, she's more solid than some of the top athletes that I've worked with, because she's doing these things and she understands. And she was in tears because her hips, she said, they feel like they're just gliding. I've never felt that before. Because we've turned things on, we haven't tried to rip things apart and bend and stretch and turn them into pretzels. The body does not respond to that, even though it will give into that, if that makes sense. And the second component of knowing how the body works is tissues must be able to slide and glide on each other. So I'm going to show you some real cadaver slides here. So if that offends you, I apologize. It's not to offend anyone. It's to actually promote an understanding and awareness. If we pull the skin off the body, which the skin is a vital component of how this works, but if we pull the skin off the body, that's what you look like. You don't see all the fancy muscles, and you don't see all the bones, and you don't see all this. What you see is a big bag. And all of these tissues are wrapped in layers and layers. And underneath this layer, there's another layer we're wrapped in. So there's multiple layers of connective tissue called fascia that all lay on top of each other, and then all muscles are wrapped in all of these tissues. So all of the muscles have their own fascia wrapped around a big fascial bag, and then there's another fascial bag that you see right here. That tissue has to slide and glide on each other. And when it doesn't, it gets gummy and it gets sticky. Just think of yourself taking honey and putting it in the refrigerator. Cold honey is gooey and sticky and does not slide and glide. Just like oil, when it's really cold, is real thick and viscous. When it warms up, then it gets smooth and is able to lubricate. So we have to understand that tissues need to be able to slide and glide for the muscles to move the way they're supposed to, and for joints to move the way they're supposed to. So if muscles can't be turned on properly because spindle function, that means the muscle's not going to contract. And if the tissues are all gummy and stuck together, that means that even if they can contract, they're still going to be limited in some of the things that they can do because the tissues are hindering it. So there's kind of a catch-22 here. There's a double whammy. This is the ankle joint. So that's the heel on the right, and that's the ankle in the top, kind of top and side on the left picture. As you can tell, you don't see all the bones and tendons and things. All you see is just massive amount of tissue. So we have to be able to have proper techniques to be able to create lubrication and get some slide and glide in those tissues without beating them up. And number 2, which is vitally important, is we have to use effective strategies that will enhance and not shut down muscle spindle function. That is key. Most people have never, ever gone through and actually tested any of this stuff. We have at Eleiko Education. That's what I've been specifically working on for the last 12 months, is all of these things, and have video proof of it in the online course. And we take you through that in the live course of the Readiness Recovery Training course. So we have to have strategies that do not shut muscle spindle function down and that create lubrication for sliding and gliding of tissues. So let me start here, and I will probably address some things, because there are so many things that actually shut tissues down. And yes, I will put it in the materials section, by the way. I just saw someone say put it in the materials section. So I will try to put that in there. when we finish here. So let me get through this and I'll get that for you. So practical strategies. First off, those are the programs. So when you download from the programs, that's what you'll get. All of those are hyperlinked and they show the video. So it shows you what to do and for how long. One of the first things we do is self-massage. Now, I know people have foam rolled. I know people, I foam roll, blah, 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 here. But when we foam roll, we're going to show you very specific things to foam roll. When you rub the skin, just so you see the picture on the left, this is generally beneficial for circulation and lubrication because of the way that you're moving the tissue. So your tissues from skin to bone are all connected. So when you move the skin, you're moving the tissue all the way to the bone, like it or not. That's just the way the tissues work. And you see those blue lines that are kind of diagonal. That's because that's the force that's being pushed on that. So if you shift the skin, if you roll the skin, you're going to get that movement. And that can be massively important. And in our programs, you're going to see a lot of the rolling that you're going to be doing, like this one, is more on the bony areas. We call that osteofascial technique because we're on the bony areas, because bony areas have a lot of tissue. And before, years ago, we always were told, don't roll the bony areas or the joints. That was bogus because we didn't have a good understanding that fascia wraps around everything and your tissues cover everything. So the bony areas actually can have more advantage for you than just the muscular areas. So you'll see a lot of the bony areas that we're going to rub and roll because that will have increased ability to create lubrication, especially in the joint areas. So we use self-massage. Now here's the key application. You're going to do one set. You're going to do 5 to 10 seconds per area. 5 to 10 seconds per area is all that you need. And that's based in research that people don't ever look at and understand. You spend 30 to 40 to 60 to 120 seconds on an area, and you don't actually do what you think you're doing. So longer than 10 seconds has been shown to shut down muscle spindle function. I can prove that to you repeatedly over and over and over. 5 to 10 seconds will not, and you will still get the tissue lubrication and shifting and gliding of the tissue that you need. Trust me, do it for 5 to 10 seconds, do the programs the way that they're laid out, and you will see an improvement. You will feel a difference. And I guarantee you, and I've done this with, and I don't have research because research takes too long to actually do. By the time you write it up, by the time you publish it, it's 2 to 3 years later, and who cares? So I'm telling you right now, I've worked with probably over 150 people in the last 12 to 18 months tops. And every person, every single person that I foam roll for longer than 10 seconds, 15 seconds max, anyone that I've done that, everyone has always been shut down. I can test you, and it doesn't matter what muscles. I've done it with hips, I've done it with calves, I've done it with shoulders, I've done it with all the different tissues. If you go longer than that, you will shut the tissue down. That means it can't activate on demand. You will feel loose because you are loose, which means you don't have stability. Mobility requires stability. Mobility, that we use that term, if we're just getting range of motion, but we can't control it, that means we have flexibility, which basically is an increase in movement with a decrease in stability. That's like putting a bigger engine in your car and taking the brakes away. That's useless. We think it's great because that's what research is saying, but research has been incomplete and it's been faulty because it's looking at range of motion, not mobility. It's not looking at, do I have the ability to control my range of motion, yes or no? And then even the ones that talk about, like I have all kinds of research about foam rolling, all kinds of different movements that say it doesn't decrease proprioception, it doesn't decrease anything. But what they're looking at isn't, did the muscle turn on automatically? It's, can you reposition the muscle? Repositioning your joint is completely different than, can the muscle activate on demand right now? So I won't go into a lengthy dissertation on that because it's something that you have to see, which in the course you will see that. So using the acute variables will provide a much more practical approach. One, you get through more of the body in a shorter amount of time, and you get a better functional output from less time. So I've done, you can do your whole body. You can foam roll your entire body in 2.5 minutes. Whereas for most people, that's one area of the body. And you can do multiple areas in the body without shutting the tissue down, without creating a dysfunctional muscle spindle. So we actually have a much more efficient way to foam roll or self-massage people. By the way, when I say self-massage, this also is for massage guns. In the online course and in the live course, you'll see we can use a massage gun. If I go 5 to 10 seconds in an area, no problem. If I go longer than that, spindle shuts down every single time. So this is why we have so many injuries, even though we have all these great mobility or recovery practices floating around in the world. Especially, I follow the American football, and it's just tragic over here. So trust me on this. We use mobilizers. So mobilizers are a slow, subtle, rhythmical, total body motion that's designed basically to gently move the tissue. So you're just moving to the point of first resistance. You're not trying to break through barriers or crack your bones or rip your tissue. It's not, the harder and faster you move with your tissue, the more it wants to respond and fight you. So when you're twisting things super, super hard and you're putting big kettlebells on your knee and trying to crank your ankle dorsiflexion, your body is fighting you. That is a ludicrous methodology because you're fighting against what the body wants to do. It's made to resist that. It's not that you can't do stuff like that, but just know that it's going to shut you down. So if you don't know how to reboot it and turn it back on, it won't come back on automatically. That's just how it works. Whether we think so or not, that's how it works. So these slow, subtle motions produce minimal force and they keep the tissues from resisting motion, which allows them to move more freely. And you get a much more smooth feeling from moving in that particular manner. They're less threatening to the body. They're less sexy because people think I have to move really big and really fast. And it's not that you can't do that, but you have to prepare your body to be able to do those things. We just want to jump right into running a marathon instead of learning how to actually run first. Okay, so less threatening. These have been shown to, when they're done properly, mobilizers will not shut down muscle function. Have tested this on multiple people. Again, a large pool. So if I was doing research and the 150 people that I've tested, I can predict and tell you exactly what's going to happen. That's not a 95% confidence level. That's a 100% confidence level. And so that's what I want to show is this has been tried, proven, and tested. And the osteofascial component that we're talking about in these mobilizers, they were actually developed with myself, but more importantly, Ian O'Dwyer, who's a buddy of mine in Australia, who has a company called Philosoma. And he's the one that came up with these concepts and these ideas. And then he and I put together this stuff years ago to actually create programming for them. So we've been using it for a long time. To perform them, and you'll see videos of these, you move slowly to the point of first feel of just a slight tension. You're not trying to go through and stretch stuff. You want to go to where you first feel the tension. So it's kind of like if you want to break a metal spoon, you don't just crank it. You bend it slowly, 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 and pretty soon it actually loosens up to where you can bend it or break it. Slow motions, the tip is if you're in water, you're trying not to make waves. So you just want to move back and forth to where you're not making waves and you're just keeping a very constant rhythmical motion. That's extremely hard for most people to do. So that's what we have to show in the live course, how to actually move rhythmically. When we can't move rhythmically and smoothly, that means that your tissues aren't actually functioning appropriately because they don't have proper timing, which means they're not coordinated, which means they don't have good proprioception, which means that there's spindle dysfunction because spindles are the primary proprioceptor. And then there's the dynamic movements that you have. Obviously, these can be very beneficial when they're done correctly. They can help reinforce good movement patterns and get you into those movements. But it has to be, it's not about how fast and how far you move, it's how well you can control the movement that you're doing. So faster and more range of motion is not better and has been shown to shut muscle spindle function down as well, which may actually increase the risk of injury. So it's not that you can't do these things. It's like you have to get your body to the point where it can start doing these things, where you can start being able to hold your activations longer. And that's, I'll use my 82-year-old lady who I work with. She couldn't hardly do anything, but yet she was doing a bunch of movements in her workouts. So all we did is I started showing her how to activate specific areas of her body. And as she did that over a course of 2 weeks, when I'd go back and test her, she was rock solid in everything and felt much better. So your body will build a tolerance up, but you have to know how to reactivate when you shut things down. I'm not saying you can't do anything. I'm saying that there is a better way to progress into doing things so that you're being safer and that you actually maintain mobility, not have to try to recreate mobility every single day. Rep range 5 to 10. So one of the most important things now, so all of those things are kind of, here's stuff that we can do. When we finish, and you'll see in your programs, when we finish the end of, we've gone through some self-massage, we've done a mobilizer 2, a dynamic warm-up, a dynamic exercise or 2, we'll finish with activation. Why? Because if by chance we shut the spindle down, we're going to finish with activation before we go into our workout session. And so we use Greg Roscoff's muscle activation techniques. We're the only company in the world who's using his self-care process, which means we are teaching you how to activate yourself, not that you have to be worked on by somebody. It works just as well. Obviously, when you have someone else do it, they can do a whole lot more things than you can, and you can't test yourself. But what we do is we prove to you, when you do the acute variables correctly, you will activate that tissue every single time. It works every single time if you do it properly. So muscle activation is how we can take these spindles that have been deactivated, whether it's overuse, under recovery, inflammation, fatigue, whatever may be the cause, usually it's a combination of all of it, and turn them back on. So these things that we talked about basically put your muscle in a weakened state, and that creates the instability of the joint. It produces tightness in the muscles as a protective response. So we want to be able to activate them so we can increase the body's tolerance to stay activated, but also to maintain joint range of motion and stability, which decreases your risk of musculoskeletal injury. So it's very simple. And we walk you through this video. We have a video for about 20 different places in your body that go through this in the online course. You place the muscle in its shortened position. So this is like a flexion with adduction and external rotation of the hip. So we have muscles that do different things in all 3 planes of motion. So we put them in flexion, adduction, external rotation, and we perform a low intensity, longer duration isometric contraction in that shortened range of motion. So the intensity is only 10 to 20% max. More is not better. If you go 50%, 1, you get a cramp, most people. 2, it won't work, because we have to focus on type 1 muscle fibers, because the type 1 muscle fibers are what get knocked offline, because those are the ones that have to fire first to stabilize the joint. The size principle, type 1, type 2, type 2A, type 2X, type 2B, yada, yada, yada. If we don't focus on getting the type 1s to turn on, we don't have a stable joint. Doesn't mean you're not going to be super strong. It just means you're not going to be stable. Best case scenario, and you go for 3 seconds, 3 to 6 seconds for 3 to 6 repetitions. So in basically 10 to 15 seconds, you reboot and reactivate that tissue. If you follow that correctly, it's critical to follow the acute variables: low intensity, longer duration. I mentioned something about strength. So I've had the fortune, I've said this before, I've had the fortune with working with Austin Perkins, who's a 74 kg, pound for pound strongest man in the world. Just came out of Sheffield, set amazing record out of the Sheffield powerlifting competition. And I met him about 1.5 years ago, and I got the opportunity, and he was actually getting ready for Sheffield in 2025, and he ended up getting injured. And I kind of had a feeling he would, just based upon when I first met him, and he was just totally fatigued, totally stressed out. and he said he blew his back out, so he didn't get to compete at the highest level he could have that year. Fast forwarded a few months, I was actually able to go through and work on him and test his body, and basically every joint that I tested him in every range of motion, he was weak, meaning that he couldn't maintain. If I held his leg up in that position and I tried to push him down and out, he couldn't hold it. If I had him out in abduction and I tried to push his leg in, he couldn't hold it. So he didn't have the ability to hold a joint position, but yet pound for pound, he's one of the strongest people in the world, if not the strongest person in the world. So we went through and showed him how to activate himself. And so I went through and just gave him, he videotaped it and was able to see how can I activate himself using the muscle activation techniques by Greg Roscoff and the self process. And fast forward, that's something that he's been incorporating into his training. And fast forward this year, he just absolutely dominated. So it's not that you're not strong, it's just that you won't maintain a high level of performance without breaking down, and or you won't be as strong as you could be. So that's the importance of this. And we finish with that specific activation process at the end of our warm-up, because we want to make sure that we are ready to go. We've gotten loose. I don't like the word loose. We've gotten lubricated. We have the ability for tissue to slide and glide. We've gotten the body to start moving, so we have better movement, sliding and gliding. We've gone through, if you do dynamic stuff, you've gone through some things to help the body move, but then you want to solidify those joints to make sure that they're stable, so when you go into your session, you can. You can actually do this as active rest. I do this all the time in my workouts. I'll use this as active rest in my training session. So if I'm going through, depending on what lifts I'm doing or what I'm working on, I'll go through certain areas to make sure that I'm maintaining activation throughout my training. It works phenomenal. And then you can finish in a cool down with it. Doesn't take long. Like I said, the programs that you have there, the 3 that you can download, they only take between 8 and 12 minutes tops, depending on how slow or fast that you go through them. So all that said, that's where we are. That's kind of just understanding mobility. Like I said, the practical application, a lot of understanding of how to do these things will be in the Readiness and Recovery Training course online. You guys get it free. So give me a second and I will try to download that right now in the materials section, and you guys can download that. So give me 1 second here. And I will try to get some questions if you guys have some questions. Computer is getting ready to download. Almost there. So you guys check in the materials and see if you can see the readiness document that's there. So it's now there. So go ahead and download that. That'll have the links that you guys that I already put in there. So that's at least some of that. And then, like I said, the rest of those links, we have a bunch of other links that you can see in the follow-up email to this. All right. So how frequently can you do the 5 to 10 second foam rolling for continued benefit? You can do it potentially every day if you need to. You can do different areas of the body as well. So the key is it's 5 to 10 seconds, and just start going through and looking at the programs themselves and getting used to that. That will be beneficial. There are so many areas that you can roll, and it's not just muscle, it's the bony areas. So in our, we have a whole exercise library of dozens of different areas so that you can roll. So that's a great question. So as much as you want on a day-to-day basis. You don't have to do it like multiple times on the same day. That's not necessary. We don't need too much, we just need enough. Should foam rolling always roll along the lines of muscle striations? No, you can roll with them, you can roll against them, you can actually shift. And so one of the things that we show more specifically in the live course is that you can get on the tissue and you can actually shift the skin, because remember, however I move the skin is going to affect the tissue underneath that all the way down to the bone. So we shift sideways, you can shift up and down, and we have a lot of different shifting techniques, and we'll take you through that in the live course. So if you can get to Sweden, I strongly suggest it. You'll love it. Unfortunately, we don't get to Sweden very much. So the courses that are run out of Sweden, unfortunately, aren't the Eleiko education courses that we have everywhere else in the world. They kind of do their own thing there, but we will be there in August. So if you want to see that, that'll be the only time probably in the next 12 months that we'll be there. And yes, and then you asked about, should I do the same things for cooling down? Yes, you can do the same things for cooling down. The most important thing to do in a cool down, I'll be very honest, if you don't have lots of time, is activation. Activation is essential following the workout, because that's how you immediately reboot the tissue. One, that helps with recovery, because the body doesn't sense that it's broken down, it senses that it's reactivated. So that sends sensory input to the brain that says, hey, we're doing okay. So one, it helps with recovery. Two, it maintains the functional status of the spindle and the muscular tissue. So it keeps you in a healthy position or a healthy state. So doing things in the cool down are vitally important. And I would say the most important thing would be activation for a cool down. And I use, like I said, activation during rest in between sets. So if I'm doing bench one day, then I may be doing a lot of activation through my shoulder girdle just to maintain that, keeping the pecs and everything activated. People always think I should stretch something after I work it out. When you stretch, just so you guys know, doesn't matter what you stretch. If you're stretching for more than 15, 20 seconds, you're shutting the spindle down. It will not reboot itself. And in the online course, you'll see that I go through research, and I've done full literature reviews on static stretching. And they say that, well, that decrease or that delay in the muscle activation will come back within seconds. I waited 20 minutes and I show you the time on there. I waited 20 minutes and then I retested the person, which was my daughter in the video, and it's still weak. The muscle spindle will not reboot itself once it is broken down. You have to turn that back on. So that's why you want to use the activation. Thank you guys for so much. I don't see any other questions. So hopefully that helps. If you guys have any questions, I'll wait here a second. If you need anything else, I'll be more than happy to. So people are still saying you can't find the links. I did put it in the materials. So I have a lot of people that say they found it in the materials. You guys find it in the materials? So there's a ton of people saying they found it in the materials section. So I put it in the chat and I put it in the materials. So you guys should have that. If you didn't have it, I'm sorry, there's nothing else I can do. I've put it in there to the best of my abilities in as many places as I can. So, all right. Okay, well, we're done. I want to thank you guys so much for your attention. Hopefully this was a benefit to you. Hopefully this had some value to you. And part 3 of this will be a little bit more on programming, not just specific sets and rep stuff, but just some programming concepts and ideas that you're going to want to think about. And that'll be, I believe it's April 29th, or yeah, so Wednesday, April 29th. And then I look forward to seeing you guys then. So have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you again for everything.